I want to talk about 5 reasons why entrepreneurs struggle with mental health the most. Entrepreneurs in particular, and I said that I would share this. I'm probably going to pull part of this part out to become to go on the podcast, but I want to talk about 5 reasons why entrepreneurs struggle with mental health the most. 72%, that is almost 3/4. That's almost 3 out of 4 people who are entrepreneurs struggle with mental health issues. Now, I want you to understand that everybody doesn't experience mental health problems in the same way. Like, everyone doesn't have panic attacks. Everyone doesn't experience depression. I think this is not Bible. Like, this is not, I don't even know if this is scientific. This is a Tracyism. I believe that every single person on this planet is prone to one or the other. I think that people are either prone to depression or prone to anxiety. And you can lean in one direction. And then there's a spectrum, of course. Like, some people will go all the way depressed, and some people will go all the way panic attack and anxiety. And some people just kind of can linger in the middle, and they know how to push energy through, or they get therapy, or they do what they need to do to make sure they push past it. But I think everyone is prone to one or the other. In many different forms. Like, it's not always, like I said, it's not always a suicidal, depressed person. Like, that's not what every depressed person becomes, because there are seasons of depression, right? You may go through a season of depression and then be out of it and then be fine. You may go through a season of anxiety and then be out of it and be fine. But then there are some people who experience it on a chronic level. Entrepreneurs are just more prone in general, myself included. I am prone to anxiety, and I know that about myself because over 10 years ago, I experienced it, and I had to confront myself with it, because if I did not in that moment, and I knew if I did not, then I would either I would have to be, addicted to pills to get me back to normal, right? Homeostasis. I would either need to do that, or I'd find myself addicted to something else. And I was driving to church. This is maybe 2 or 3 months ago, and I was driving. This is when I started. This is before COVID, by the way. Before COVID happened, and I started to think about this conversation of anxiety and this conversation of depression and just mental health. I was driving to church, and there's a song that's part of the song says, prone to wander, Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. And I was like, man, like, for me, prone to wander is anxiousness. Like, I'm not out here living foul in the streets. Like, that's not my prone to wander. My prone to wander is to abandon everything that I know, to abandon all truth about God and what God thinks of me and what God has in store for my life, to completely abandon that in favor of anxiety. That is my version of a prone to wander. And I think a lot of people experience that too, is that, sometimes our deviation from who we know we are called to be has nothing to do with like shooting someone or, stealing, robbing a bank. Like, it's not that. It's just the abandonment of the truth of who we are. And entrepreneurs can do, there's my hair in my eye, but entrepreneurs can do this a little bit more than others. And here are the 5 reasons. Number 1, we often attach our identity to the success or failure of our enterprise or of our business. We define ourselves by how well we can do something, or how something did not work. And we will attach ourselves and ground ourselves in the identity of failure, and become the victim and become the martyr, and choose to live that storyline over and over again. And we forget who God says that we are, because it's almost like, above all else, you just want to be an entrepreneur, and that is the defining thing of your whole life. And that is simply not true, because many people are not just entrepreneurs. You could be a friend, a brother, a sister, a coach, a lover of music. I mean, there are so many parts of us that make us who we are. I am not just an entrepreneur. Like, I am not just a business coach. I'm an aunt, and I'm a sister, and I'm a daughter, and I am, a lover of yoga pants. I mean, there are a lot of things that make me who I am, and it's not just being an entrepreneur. But when you attach your identity to entrepreneurship as if that is all who you are, anytime there is a failure, and there will be a failure, everything does not work 100% of the time. I can tell you that wholeheartedly. Everything that I've ever done as an entrepreneur, as a business person, does not always stick. I do not attach my identity to the failure, or I do not attach my identity to whether or not something works. It just doesn't work. And then I try something else. Like, it doesn't take away from who I am, doesn't take away from who God says I am. It doesn't do any of those things. But that is one of the reasons why entrepreneurs in particular experience mental health problems. The second reason is because there is so much uncertainty. There is so much uncertainty in the world of entrepreneurship. There just is. Now I'm going to talk about this a little later on. I love the uncertainty. I love the unknown, but it is not something that I always loved. Your brain wants to know what's next. It always wants to know what's next. It does. So anytime you don't give it a what's next, it's freaking out. And that's what causes stress. And when it lives in the perpetual cycle of stress, because you're an entrepreneur and there's so much uncertainty and there's so much unknown, you live in that space of stressful environment, then you create the perfect environment for more stress to happen and panic attacks to occur. But the unknown space, that uncertainty of, I don't know if this is going to work, that's what causes people to really walk away from entrepreneurship, because they just don't like it. They don't like it. There's so much uncertainty. But part of the definition, I've talked about this before, part of the definition of being an entrepreneur requires risk. Like, the definition in the Merriam-Webster dictionary says, assumes all risk. That's just what it says. And there are some people who love it and lean into it. And then there are others who they hate it. They don't like it because their whole life was planned out. Their whole life said, I'm going to go to school, and then I'm going to college, and then I'm going to have a career. And then all of a sudden there was an interruption to the pattern, and you were called to entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship looked drastically different than the previous 10, 15, 20 years of your life. And now you cannot take it. And that is understandable. It's one of the reasons why we experience the kind of stress that we experience. Number 3, what's really interesting about this is that all of the qualities that make a good entrepreneur, creativity, empathy, this willingness to take a risk, this desire for freedom and independence, all of those things that make a great entrepreneur also are a perfect catalyst for creating mental health problems. Like, they are the same characteristics that actually predispose you to mental health issues. Isn't that something? So it's not a surprise why people who are entrepreneurs are great, because they have these qualities, but also experience this. Lori says, I need to hear that. I'm so glad you did. So true. Wow. Why do you always know what I need to hear? That is the Lord, Lori. But I'm glad that it's resonating. It is good to practice presence. Absolutely. Flora says truth. Good. So I'm glad that this is resonating with some of you guys. So that is number 3. And number 4, especially in 2020 with entrepreneurs, we have, like, it's what psychology calls impression management. It's this picture perfect everything. We want to manage how we appear to society as entrepreneurs. We do. So when things are not perfect, then we feel like a fraud. When you don't feel like you are in the private jet like that person over there, you have imposter syndrome. When you don't have the New York Times bestseller, you don't think that you're good enough. And so it's this concept of impression management, and what we are seeing in the online space, and this compare problem that all entrepreneurs have. Why can't I do that? Why can't I be as successful as that person? Why was it so easy for that person over there? The other day, I was talking to a client, and she said, well, how did this person get to do it so quickly? And I said, you do realize that person started in 2008. Like, it's not actually quick. She started her blog in 2008. That is over a decade ago. What you're seeing is a decade's worth of work showing up now as the picture perfect, model mom entrepreneur. But I can tell you that it did not start yesterday or 3 months ago or last year or 2 years ago. 12 years is how long it took for that person, who's a very successful author, New York Times bestseller, has a very successful conference. It took her longer than 12 years, like, to build the empire that she's built. But we see what exists right now, and we're like, oh, I want that too. And why can't I? You can. If anything, it just shows you what's available. But it doesn't mean that your journey is going to be the same. And then number 5, and I think we're getting better at this, even having this conversation, I think means that we're getting better at this, but just understanding that there's support available for you and the willingness to talk about it. I think people hide, and even myself, I think I hid it, but I hid it because maybe I was ashamed. I don't know if I was ashamed. I can't really think. I didn't know anybody else that had had it. I can tell you that. Like, I didn't know anybody else that had panic attacks. I didn't know anybody else that had, anxiety problems. And so for that reason, I just didn't think anybody could relate. And so I don't think I was ashamed that I had them, but I didn't think anybody could relate to me. And that's why I didn't share it. And so now I think we're finding that more people are actually experiencing it. And so we get to have the conversation on a much deeper level than just what it is. In social psychology, when panic attacks happen, social psychology, I'm going to tell you what they said. And this is not wrong, by the way. Like, they'll say, be present. Like, when a panic attack is happening, know that you are having a panic. Well, yes, you're having a panic attack because you're experiencing it. And so that's not wrong. You need to know that you're having a panic attack. But what we need to do is interrupt what your body is doing. And it's not just a thought. That's my point, is I think what we've been told is like, say an affirmation. Like, okay, that's great. But if your body and your mind are not in sync, that affirmation ain't gonna work, because 95% of how you live your life lives in the body, not in the mind. So you can say the affirmation until kingdom come, and it's not gonna work because your mind and your body is freaking out.